You didn't hear that?
Perfect for you.
You can sit here, sir. Sir, sir.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I'm not gonna bite you.
Okay,
Don't think there's nothing about me, right?
I heard about this. All right. You want to build on steep slopes?
For me, no. Which one are you for? Are you opposition?
I tell better places in Chattanooga you can build on flat land.
Well, there you go. You can speak up.
Yeah, why not?
You're here. You're first. You're right there, real quick.
That's why we're right here. You gonna speak to it?
No, I'm supporting you. She's still presenting.
Oh,
She's presenting.
she presented.
Yeah.
She wants
So you
to-
got the first spot. You never really.
Hey, well, let's make it happen. She's gonna speak first, though, ladies first.
Yeah, she's gonna do the
Ladies
presentation.
first. All right. Okay. Steep slopes. Want to build on steep slopes?
Good evening, everyone. How are y'all this evening? Everybody's ready for a good, friendly, fun time tonight? Oh, okay. I guess that's a yes. Okay. I now call to order this November 5th, 2019 City Council meeting. We will now have a pledge of allegiance and invocation, should he please, by Councilman Gilbert. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's Mr. Jordan. There you go. Can you come up?
Wait a minute. Yeah, hit your button again, please. Just takes a second.
There it is. Mr. Jordan from Venue, will you please say a prayer for us?
I'd be honored to. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for this amazing city that we have. I just pray blessing and favor and protection on all of our city council members, God. And I just thank you that you want to do incredible things in the city. You're giving them the wisdom, the discernment, and the knowledge to make the right decisions to move our city forward. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. There is no special presentation, but tonight we do have a public hearing centered around steep slopes, floodplains, and natural resource assignment. And I would imagine that's why we have such a full crowd here tonight. So once again, thank you all for coming. One person I would like to thank for getting us to this point is our Chair of Planning and Zoning, Councilman Darren Ledford. So thank you for your insight and providing the startup, if you will, to get this conversation going on such an important issue in our community. So Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we will have a public hearing, so I want to welcome everyone to your city council meeting tonight. We are glad you're here, and to voice your opinion on this very important report from RPA. A year ago, many council members were contacted by concerned citizens about development in steep slope areas and flooding from active development sites. At that time, Council asked staff to conduct a study of the issue and to look at peer cities and other practices, including collecting data with the help of the UTC Engineering Department and other sources to help make recommendations and approaches to address these concerns. Staff released this study, the Natural Resource Assessment, just a few weeks ago, and we are all starting to digest the information provided. I want to emphasize that this is a study. This is not a specific ordinance that is being considered by City Council at this time. In fact, given the importance of this issue, the Council will be spending more time over the next few months looking at the report recommendations before we provide any direction to staff. Once we provide direction to staff, they will work on developing ordinance proposals that will be vetted through another public process. We have heard from many of you on specific concerns and specific projects, which is why we are here tonight. This is our first step in considering the report recommendations. We want to hear what you think about the natural resource assessment. RPA staff will provide a brief presentation, and then we will turn it over to you. We have allotted 3 minutes per speaker. Please remember, every one of us can be reached outside of this hearing to further explain your comments. We have allotted 45 minutes, and council may choose to extend the time as appropriate. Following this public hearing, we will have a special Planning and Zoning Committee meeting next Tuesday, November 12th, immediately following the 3 p.m. agenda session in this room. This meeting is not a public comment session. At this meeting, staff will provide an overview of the comments provided at tonight's hearing. Council will then discuss next steps for how we better inform ourselves about the report recommendations, which includes another education session at our strategic planning session on November 12th at 1:30 in the Collins Conference Room. I hope that was clear enough, Mr. Chairman, but if not, everyone can follow our council calendar where all this information and dates and times can be found. I want to thank you again for everyone coming out tonight, voicing your opinion about the RPA Natural Resource Assessment Report. This council has pen and paper in hand and ready to listen. I yield the floor to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councilman Ledford. Very well said, and an excellent way of getting this hearing started. Now, at this time, I will ask John Bridger if he will come and give us a little insight onto how we got to this point.
Sure. I'll be very brief. I'm going to turn it over to Emily. She was the project lead on this effort. Just again, emphasize it's a year-long project. That is a technical report. That's what it is. That includes a variety of options for this city to consider. And I think really this is the first step. So just again to emphasize, we looked at best practices and what was taking place in other peer cities in the Southeast to come up with some options for you all to consider as council. So I'm going to let Emily give you a brief overview of the executive summary, and then we'll begin the public hearing. Emily?
I want to thank everyone again for coming, and thank you for your opening remarks, Councilman Ledford. So just a quick reminder for those that may be new to this project on how we got here today. I think as many of us know, population, job, and construction growth has been booming in Chattanooga the last 10 years. And with that, we have been seeing more development in some of our steeper hillside or flood-prone areas, which has then led to additional public concerns related to this development. So many people have started reaching out and being more vocal to their council representatives, as well as coming to planning commission meetings and speaking with RPA staff through other public planning processes. And so due to all of this recent concern, the City Council adopted a resolution last December instructing staff to basically write this natural resources assessment, offering a variety of recommendations, looking at best practices, as well as peer reviews as mentioned. The project approach that staff used throughout the year. First, we examined development trends over a 10-year period, looking at land disturbing permit data, zoning case data, and building permit data. We also looked at where are these natural resource areas throughout the city. We worked with a 12-member advisory committee meeting made up of citizens, developers, real estate professionals, citizens, and a lawyer. And I know some of them are here today, and I would like to extend my thanks for all of them for participating, volunteering their time and their input. Similarly, we also worked with a technical committee made up of city staff from the Land Development Office, engineering, a professional environmental engineer, as well as a UTC professor. And they provided technical support and assisted with the data analysis, and I'd also like to assist them as well. Staff also conducted a peer review. We started nationwide and then narrowed it down to cities within the Southeast. And we examined, again, their best management practices and what are their existing environmental regulations to compare those to Chattanooga's. And lastly, we used a variety of sources to help provide scientific and technical information in the report. Throughout the entire report and process, staff tried to keep this question in mind while writing the assessment. How do we find balance of protecting the city's natural amenities while still allowing growth to happen? These are just some of the brief key findings from the data. The report that's on the RPA's website goes into much more detail. But as you can see, 54% of vacant land is located in the over 25% slope class, which staff identified as the steepest areas of the city. Overall building permits increased by 6% during this 10-year period. However, permits in the over 25% slope class increased by 45%. 70% of zoning requests are located either in steep slopes or floodplain or both. And lastly, there has been an increased risk with property damage due to flooding, with 87 losses and $5 million alone in 2018. And so, as has been mentioned earlier, staff did conduct the peer review. These are the 6 cities that we dove into further. Also has the dates of when their environmental regulations were originally adopted, as well as any new amendments that have happened along the years. I'd also like to note the other local jurisdictions that weren't included in our gaps analysis that we're calling it, which is essentially comparing Chattanooga's regulations to these other cities and seeing where they match or don't match. But other cities locally include Walden, Lakeside, Catoosa County, and Walker County. They all also have some version of environmental protection standards as well. But based on our gaps analysis of these 6 jurisdictions, Chattanooga has 2 out of 22 matching zoning or subdivision categories. So that does clearly show that we do have a gap between what other cities have in their regulations compared to ours. And part of that could be because the city has not done a comprehensive zoning ordinance update in over 40 years since the code was adopted in 1961. It has been amended periodically, certain sections here and there over time, but we haven't gone through each section and updated the entire thing. So that may be part of the reason why some of these standards have not been updated. Staff also did a similar analysis of land disturbing permit requirements, which are located in Section 31 of the municipal code, so not in the zoning ordinance. That analysis showed 19 out of 29 matching categories. So those standards are a little bit more on par with the other peer review. So based on all the analysis, public comment, and working with our committees, we've came up with 4 proposals for council to consider. The first would be an overlay, which would be similar to the short-term vacation rental overlay, where it's a specific boundary and properties that are within the boundary would be eligible to applying, or excuse me, for having to comply with the overlay boundary requirements, whereas those that are not would not be, versus an ordinance could be applied citywide for any property that may meet whatever those specific ordinance criteria are that have yet to be determined. Whereas a policy is similar to the comprehensive plan or land use plans that have been adopted by City Council. Policies provide recommendations to City Council and Planning Commission, but they're not local law and enforceable. And lastly, no change would mean that there would be no new regulations or policies adopted by council, and RPA and land development and other city staff would continue operating with current regulations, and city council would put in extra protections with conditional zoning. So staff is recommending an ordinance because there are already plans and policies in place that suggest natural resource protection. The report identifies over 24 plans that have been adopted previously that have some sort of recommendation for this. So another policy is redundant. Additional regulations can help address public concerns, and an ordinance is enforceable, whereas a policy is not. And so we're hoping the ordinance standards that will be developed will still allow development to happen. It just may be in a different way. And so these are some of the sections that are outlined in the report as sort of that toolkit that John mentioned, where council could pick to update any of these 3 sections here. So in summary, the report identifies 24 proposed changes to those 3 code sections, 7 of which are more restrictive. 5 have new tools or definitions. 4 are more flexible, providing development incentives. And 8 are process or due diligence related. And if council does instruct staff to work on the ordinance and it does get adopted at some point in the future, staff is recommending a 6-month grace period similar to the form-based code, where if there are existing permits that are still in the queue or people were close to applying, they still have the opportunity to apply and comply with the current standards before they would have to comply with any new regulations that would be put in place. This also allows time for staff to offer training and work with the public, as well as training among staff to make sure everybody understands all of the new regulations. So as Councilman Ledford mentioned, our next steps is the 1:30 strategic planning meeting next Tuesday, as well as the 3 o'clock planning and zoning meeting. On Tuesday, the October 29th, the council expressed interest in also attending field trips to try to see how the peer review cities are, what's happening in them and how the regulations are working. So they will be doing that in the next few months, but those have not been scheduled yet. And so at this point, there's been no instruction to draft an ordinance, so any future steps will be determined at a later date. We will keep everything up to date on the RPA's website. Here, people can feel free to reach out to me. I've included my business cards out on the podium, out in the hall. We also have a sign-up sheet. If nobody has signed up yet, feel free to do that, whether you're in support or opposition of the project, or whether you want to just provide your contact information, just be updated for any future updates with the project. So with that, I will end the presentation and open it up to the public comment. Thank you.
Sure. Councilman Burris.
Thank you. Emily, would you go back to your slide about the choices? So I guess thank you for your hard work. It's terrific. I see those as siloed choices, and I'm thinking that perhaps we might consider some sort of matrix of all of these. One of the things that's occurred to me is it a problem with the laws we have in place right now, or is it rather a problem of enforcement? I would love you to add one more thing here, and using best practices, look at what we have in place right now and see where it might be problematic relative to enforcement of what we have right now. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important not to overregulate when we already have some pretty good laws, that perhaps the issue may be lack of enforcement or lack of enforcement during process. We've got a bunch of good people in the community that do a good job. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be able to handle, enforcement-wise, people that may not go to that high level. So if you would please add number 5, review of what we have now, and not no change in the law relative to the law, but take a look at unintended consequences and also enforcement of what we have now, which I think is critical. I don't think we make laws just for the sake of making laws. And you've done such a great job. That's one variable that I think we haven't addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I'd like to go back and thank you, Emily, John, and the rest of the RPA team for all the work that you've put into this. But I especially want to thank the advisory committee and the technical committee for the time that they've put into this, the thoughtfulness, and the fact that they really did their due diligence in coming up with hearing and researching what would be good practices moving forward. So with that being said, we will move on now to what we're all here for, the public hearing. And I would like to just briefly share with y'all the process. Each person who wants to have a voice is given 3 minutes. and the max for this is 45 minutes. Now, there could be opportunities based on what my colleagues want, and if we see that there's more people here than the 45 minutes, we will be amenable to that, because we want to make sure that every voice is heard in this process. So with that being said, if you can start coming to the podium on my left and your right, we'll proceed with the hearing. And once again, thank everybody here for coming, because it shows that you really care about our great city. Go ahead.
Each person speaking, if you would, provide the council with your name and address, and if you're in the city, your council district, so at least they know who they can deal with in that regard. And each person can only speak up at the microphone here and get your 3 minutes.
Sir.
Ready? Okay. Hi, Jim Johnson, 1638 Berkeley Circle in North Chattanooga. Also was on the advisory committee and with Chattanoogans for Responsible Development. Our natural resources are a major part of what makes Chattanooga unique and gives our community value. The scenic settings, the outdoor lifestyle, the green spaces, a great place to raise a family, a great place to spend tourism dollars, a great place to bring a business, a biodiverse region ripe with natural assets. But so much of this is at risk, thanks mostly to a relative handful of builders and developers, especially related to steep slopes and floodplains. Again and again, we hear from our neighbors and the media about streets that are becoming muddy rivers, about sinkholes, about unstable hillsides and landslides, about overtaxed stormwater facilities and threatened water quality, about clear cutting that is destroying the viewsheds and wildlife habitat. Interestingly, I spoke at length earlier today for the first time with Doug Fisher, Executive Officer of the Home Builders Association, and I think that he and perhaps most association members share the same concerns. Where we disagree is with many of the tools that may be recommended as part of a future ordinance. But even there, it's possible we may agree more than we disagree. I personally don't believe that most of the tools mentioned in the assessment are anti-development. Instead, they emphasize ways we can be strategic about where and how we encourage and limit development. The study benefited from other cities having in some cases decades of data and experience, including both the positive and negative consequences of enacted policies and ordinances. I'd also like to point out that it's not just about creating new regulations, it's also about providing incentives to builders, and also amending current ordinances that often make it difficult not to disturb steep slopes, such as setback requirements. So Mr. Fisher and I may disagree on the tools, but we fully agree on the need for all parties to come together in an open and ongoing dialogue that is deliberate and fair, and that takes the time required to come up with an outcome that balances the needs of the builders and the community at large. And this could be a rare instance of where opposing parties can come together and collaborate rather than confront, and sit around a conference table rather than try to figure out things, from podium. So I encourage the City Council to direct the RPA to come up with Councilwoman Burrs, I like your idea of a matrix as opposed to silo. So whichever of those is appropriate, but being sure to provide sufficient opportunities for all constituents, including builders, developers, and property owners, to provide input throughout the process. You have the opportunity to create a pivotal moment in our city's history, one where our city's leaders stand up, put their feet down, and say, no more. No more irresponsible development, no more destruction of our natural resources. And it's also a pivotal moment where we stop talking about sides and more about solutions. Let's work toward that goal together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah.
Ready? Okay, Sylvester Harris, 3300 Curtis Street. Okay, I'd like to, this is coming from the heart. I didn't have a speech prepared. I walked in on this and I saw that it was going to be steep slopes, and I did address this, in the past. My biggest problem with a lot of this is I wish some of the developers would come to other parts of Chattanooga, and primarily East Chattanooga. It's a lot of flat land, good land, nice places to build at. We don't have to destroy areas just because everybody want to pile in one place. Let's make Chattanooga great. When I was standing here and we was doing the pledge, and we were saying one nation under God and indivisible for liberty and justice for all. We need to make some of these words speak and speak loud to everybody, you know, because we need those that can make Chattanooga better, help make it better. Sometimes we got to quit thinking about our pockets and think about what's good and what's great for this country. You know, Donald Trump say, let's make America great again. Well, what about let's make Chattanooga great again? Let's be a city that we can team together and show other cities, look here, we don't have to just, you know, because I remember one time North Chattanooga just wasn't a place to be. South Chattanooga wasn't a place to be. Main Street wasn't a place to be. We can fix up other places. This is America. And if we can't get together as people and make places better for everybody, I'm talking about everybody, show the young kids that don't see hope, that it is hope, that they can dream to have these big houses that they put on these steep slopes, which I don't mean no harm, that I wouldn't put some of these beautiful houses on these steep slopes and damage people's houses downstream. I got friends in North Chattanooga. They got streams that's running in their backyard that hadn't ran like this in years because all this building is running a lot of water in different places, and the other people downstream has to suffer. But, you know, we can do this. This is America, and I can go right now, and if I want to go grow some grass, I can get the formula and grow it because it'll tell me every step I can do. And I can't get people together and make this city great or make this country great. You know, we dropping the ball. We got to show these kids, the young kids that's coming up, that we can all stand together and make this city together and make it beautiful in all the places. Don't forget everybody. Let's make it, because look, if somebody dropped a bomb right today in this room, we all going. I don't care who we are. It ain't gonna say, hey, look, you lived in North Chattanooga, you lived over here, you lived over there. We all here together, and we gotta make it together. You know, all these beautiful words we said, a beautiful speech, a beautiful prayer. Let's pray about making America and this city great. Thank you for your time and everything. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Tim McDonald, and 5021 Sunnyside Avenue in District 7, Councilman Oglesby's district. And I also served on the Citizens Advisory Committee on this project, and I want to thank my council member for nominating me to do that. It was a learning experience. I also want to thank John and Brian and Emily and their staff for the hard work that they put into this, because it was a great deal of work, and I do appreciate that. My initial comment, an overriding comment, is I would really like the council to consider an ordinance, a serious ordinance, perhaps with a matrix comparing alternatives and options that will protect our steep slopes and our flood-prone areas. And I think an ordinance is better than a policy. Policies can be worked around. Policies can be ignored. An ordinance has the strength of the law behind it. And I make this comment for three reasons. First, looking at some dollars. Chattanooga is a scenic city, and a source at the Times Free Press told me that over $1 billion came into Hamilton County in tourist direct spending in 2018. And I do believe, and I wasn't sure, so I asked again and got the same figure. I do believe that those tourist dollars are generated largely because of our scenic beauty. We have the river, but we also have the beautiful slopes of Lookout Mountain, Hawkins Ridge, Missionary Ridge, Stringer's Ridge, and Signal Mountain that need to be protected. And I think if we do not protect the view sheds and give a measure of protection, we will lose money over the long haul. I really do. My second comment comes from my background as a now retired stormwater manager for Hamilton County. I've seen stormwater issues from the good, the bad, and the ugly, the really ugly. And the stormwater problems that result from development of steep slopes are serious. You change the coefficient of runoff, you remove tree cover, you clear cut, and that results in a number of issues for the people downstream, not to mention compliance with our NPDES permit. The soils on these steep slopes in Chattanooga, and you can look this data up in the USGS, there's a soil survey on file that will give this information. These soils don't lend themselves to development. They don't take well to being disturbed, they don't compact, and some serious problems result. I can show you a place not far from my own property in which a slope was clear-cut, graded, poorly stabilized until the city came out, and I do appreciate their efforts to come out and stabilize it. 5 feet tall by about 12 feet wide that broke off and is now down the hill on my downhill neighbor. We don't need that to keep happening. We need to be able to deal with that. My third reason, we need affordable housing in Chattanooga. And as the gentleman before me said, there is flat land out there that can be built on that isn't steep and it's not flood prone. Affordable housing makes it easier for the developers to build and the builders to build. It doesn't cost them as much, and it makes it easier for families to buy it. And that's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Before you start the clock on me, could I, with the council's permission, could I ask that anyone in the room tonight that's livelihood is dependent upon the construction, home building industry, in any form or fashion, please rise. Thank you very much. I think you have folks outside too. Good evening, my name is Doug Fisher. As the Executive Officer of the Home Builders Association of Greater Chattanooga, I represent more than 130 professional home builders and nearly 500 small business owners and their employees, whose livelihood depends on the construction industry. A 3-year-old economic impact study, which is due to be updated very shortly, indicates the home building industry in the Chattanooga area contributes more than $200 million to the local economy annually. It shows that the industry is responsible for the creation of more than $27 million in taxes and other revenue to our local governments. More important is the fact that the home building industry directly employs better than 3,000 people in Hamilton County, Tennessee. This does not include the indirect impact on companies like accounting firms, title companies, mortgage brokers, pest controls, equipment sales, security companies, and numerous others unknown. Additionally, our Association of Builders has a long track record of commitment to this community, including partnerships with the community nonprofits such as Habitat for Humanity, the Red Cross, and Hamilton County Schools. We believe there's a great opportunity this evening, not unlike Mr. Johnson in our conversation, and I appreciate his remarks. I've personally been involved in public policy making for more than 30 years, most of it here in Chattanooga. Lately, it's become very troubling to watch the way decisions are being made in our national, state, and local making law chambers. I would like for us to prove today that a highly controversial and complicated issue as the one we face today can be resolved through civil and respectful discourse. In that spirit, let us first and foremost say, Councilman, we get it. We understand why this is an important study. We understand that primarily the actions of a few in our industry have brought us to this point. We as professionals are here today to join you in helping to resolve those problems. That said, we are also assured statistically the number of those issues continue to decline. We believe we can and must be a part of improvement when it comes to any future violations of the community trust. We're committed through being supportive of legislation and education to help remedy those issues, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not here today to categorically dismiss these recommendations. We can all agree to the benefits of discussion about the reduction of road right-of-ways, setback restrictions, exemptions on lot size, added erosion, control measures, the timing of retaining wall construction during a project, and certainly, the need for better enforcement of current regulations. 2 representatives of the Home Builders Association were invited to participate in the advisory committee for the development of this report. During that process, the Home Builders Association submitted a 3-page, I only have a couple of minutes, please.
Okay, yeah.
In the short period of that time, we had to digest this 100.
Mr. Please, let's
Really?
keep it going.
Seriously?
Yes. Yeah, let's keep it going. Everybody's been respectful to 3 minutes, so let's follow suit. Yes. Can he finish his sentence? Sure, okay, he can finish his sentence. Okay, that'll be fine.
Maybe I should ask the 136 home builders that I represent to come up here and stand in line. And they were letting
Okay. Well, I mean, you know, they got 45 minutes after the last gentleman speaks, so, and I think we're gonna be right on that time limit. So, if you please, you're disrespecting those that are behind you who wants to speak within that time frame.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of City Council. My name is Grace Wooten. I'm a landscape architect and also the chair of the City of Chattanooga's Tree Commission. And I am here on behalf of the Tree Commission to express our position on the Natural Resources Assessment and a Natural Resources Protection Ordinance. So some background on the Tree Commission is that it was created by the Tree Ordinance and has been in existence for nearly 30 years. We are a 9-member board appointed by the mayor of the City of Chattanooga. We are tasked with studying the needs of the City of Chattanooga in connection with its urban forestry program and to report from time to time to the governing body of the city as to desirable legislation concerning the tree program and related activities for the city. In recognition of the core issues as identified in the executive summary of the Natural Resources Assessment, combined with the peer review core analysis, and in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of this wonderful city, the Chattanooga Tree Commission supports the development of a Natural Resources Protection Ordinance. We are specifically concerned regarding the subjects of tree canopy protection standards, development on steep and wooded slopes, and the retention and protection of large and stately trees that would be considered as heritage trees and are revered as local treasures. We stand ready to assist with the development of a Natural Resources Protection Ordinance by providing information and technical assistance, as many of our members are landscape architects and certified arborists, and deeply believe that such an ordinance is long overdue for this great city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sally Wenzel. I'm also a member of the Tree Commission, and thank you, Grace, for making the plight of trees central. I'm here both as a resident of Hickson. I am a Hickson in Mr. Smith's district. And I'm here on behalf of the Tennessee Valley Wild Ones, which is part of a national nonprofit organization that supports the preservation of native plant communities and also promotes sustainable landscaping practices. So I'm very concerned and embrace the idea of an ordinance, because obviously the Land Development Office and others enforcers are overtaxed with trying to get out and stop some of the not best practices that are going on in the construction industry. And I have a written submittal that I gave to Mr. Smith. So I'm not going to read everything from it, but I want to make one point, one made by Henry David Thoreau. What's the use of a fine house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? I think Chattanooga is very proud of its natural heritage, and we should be. And as other speakers are going to point out, once it's gone, it's gone. Just like the natural areas, once we've gone in and disturbed them and developed, biodiversity goes down. Species go extinct. One thing I want to point out is when you go in and disturb an area, you are removing habitat. How many of you have heard 1 out of 3 bites comes from pollinators? I hope you have heard, because it's true. We might think that honeybees and beekeepers are taking care of this, but actually pollinators are the ones, the native bees and other insects that actually live in the forest, live in undisturbed lands. We are going out, and I know this is the city of Chattanooga, but you just saw on the slide that quite a bit is undeveloped. Let's protect it. Again, once it's gone, it's gone. And I'm going to just make one more paean to Leo Tolstoy, who said, one of the first conditions of happiness is that the link between man and nature shall not be broken. And I just hate to see us breaking that link in the name of economic benefit, which I would contest, and I'm sure other economists can do so too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Beth Santoro, and I'm a homeowner. I'm in District 2 of North Chattanooga, and I don't represent any associations or organizations, but hopefully I can speak for other homeowners in the area. I'm speaking to encourage your support of the RPA staff recommendations as outlined in the Natural Resources Assessment. I want to specifically address the issue of development on properties with steep slopes. Deforested steep slopes are susceptible to rapid erosion and can cause uncontrolled stormwater drainage issues. Also, they are unsightly. I think most of us would agree that we would like Chattanooga to maintain its reputation as a scenic city. Steep hillsides were once bypassed as too costly to build on. And as we noted in the presentation, I think it said 54% of the vacant lots in Chattanooga are now steep slopes of 25% or greater. In District 2, the percentage of steep slopes is at 60%, with slopes of 30% or greater. And these numbers are not insignificant. At this point in Chattanooga's growth phase, addressing the potential for issues caused by development on remaining vacant properties is very timely. Due to the added cost of building on steep slopes, developers may be inclined to cut corners in order to recoup some of the additional expenses. Without a set of enforced ordinances in place to protect both existing and future property owners, the expenses of correcting erosion, landslides, and foundation issues will ultimately fall on these property owners and also the city of Chattanooga, instead of on the builders whose risk window is merely in the short term. Thus, I hope you will support the RPA in establishing a set of ordinances that will ensure responsible development practices on the remaining vacant properties in Chattanooga. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carol Mays. I'm a resident of Browntown Road. I'm in Councilman Chip Henderson's district, and I'm speaking today because of something Carol Burt said. I appreciate what you say, that you were saying that people are trying to get out of doing the right thing, and I think that's a very polite way of saying it, because 3 years ago, developers came in adjacent to our property, and I can say that I have never felt so bullied, lied to, and disrespected in all those years. We went through the proper channels. Our neighborhood got the petitions, went to the county commission meeting. RPA was recommending to deny, but it was passed. We have a great councilman, Chip Henderson. He got the neighborhood and the builders together trying to make some kind of compromise when we went to city council. So in that meeting, we were bullied and told that if we didn't compromise, if we didn't come to an agreement, they would build, and they would just build closer to our houses. So we came to an agreement. The most important thing to us was that we agreed that 15 foot of untouched and protected buffer zone wooded area would remain protected and undisturbed. Well, they agreed to it. It was set into resolution. It was voted on. It was a resolution. And it was also a resolution that that would be forever. Leaving there, we found out very quickly that forever was not forever. And soon after that, the developers asked for a meeting between the neighborhood again. Chip Henderson was there and the city attorney was there. They proceeded to tell us why they did not have to abide by the resolution that city council had passed. So they were wanting to take the trees down anyway. Also, they were putting a pond, a reservoir pond, that would catch the water. Well, they told us in this meeting this pond would not hold water for more than 5 days. It has held water for more than 2 years. Stagnant water, muddy, disgusting water. With the exception of 7 days about a year ago when they held the Home Builders Association meeting in that area, at which time they put a fountain in it and colored it blue. Well, 7 days after that, that almost makes it worse to me, knowing that they can fix it, but they don't. I want to end by telling you the meeting ended with them saying that they were going to have a meeting with the city. So the day before this meeting happened with the city, the developers came in and were tearing down the trees. The police couldn't help us, said it was not their issue. The city, land development, they said, well, we cannot help you. And I looked at my husband and said, nobody can help us, God help us. The moment that left my mouth, lightning struck in the middle of the development, And the guy got back on his machine, proceeded to tear the trees down. He got one more tree down before his bulldozer sank. So thank you, and praying for the city, and I'm also praying for the developers that they will begin to do the right thing.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Kim Bass, current president of Greater Chattanooga Association of Realtors, and I would like to thank the City Council for allowing us the opportunity to speak today. We also appreciate the City Council for being proactive by ensuring the scenic city remains a natural beauty, attracting residents and visitors alike to Chattanooga for years to come. After reviewing the Natural Resources Assessment issued by RPA on October the 15th, the Greater Chattanooga Realtors would like to provide the following statement. Although additional regulations may be needed and in many cases may be necessary, our concerns are that current regulations have not been properly enforced to determine if additional, more stringent regulations are even necessary. Many of the complaints previously voiced by residents could have potentially been avoided had the current regulations been followed. For example, erosion control measures are required to be in place to reduce and/or to prevent sediment runoff from development sites. Also, had proper impervious construction methods been implemented on construction sites, stormwater runoff could have been properly controlled, possibly preventing the flooding of residents during the heavy rain events. Based on the information provided, current regulations were not being adhered to and/or enforced, which resulted in the City Council's request for the RPA to conduct their National Resources Assessment. We believe that the implementation and enforcement of proper construction methods that already exist could lessen the need for more stringent regulations. In addition, we recognize that with increased development comes the need for increased oversight by the City of Chattanooga. This increased oversight may place additional burdens on city staff that had not been previously required. The Greater Chattanooga Realtors would be willing to assist the city in finding alternative oversight methods that might assist with some of these issues and be more cost-effective than implementing more stringent regulations. We appreciate the RPA considering the importance of lots of record and how they should be handled should the city implement a natural resources ordinance. However, we have a concern that no clear consensus has been reached on how these lots should be handled, and the recommendations seem to suggest that it be handled on a case-by-case basis. This is an extremely important property rights issue that should be addressed on the front end and not left as an afterthought. We respectfully request that lots of record be evaluated prior to any recommendation in order to further ensure the property rights of these owners are protected. I'm sorry. I'm a little nervous. The Natural Resources Assessment outlined numerous additional amendments and are tools that could be explored further to potentially implement in the future. Examples of these tools are tree canopy protection standards, site plan review, or geotechnical reports for critical lots. I didn't get through, but you have it to read. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You did well.
Good evening, council members. My name is Sarah Page. I live at 1159 East Main Street and am in Councilman Byrd's district. I am an architect here in the city and have the joy of working with our current zoning code. And I would really like to point out that one of the reasons why you all are doing this in the first place is that to this point, you have been using conditional zoning ordinances on a case-by-case basis to address these concerns of our residents and property owners. And that is a logistical nightmare for designers and developers. It makes it very difficult for us to plan ahead of time what can be done on a site. And then if someone should come back later to redevelop the site, sometimes these conditional zoning ordinances get lost until it comes time to permitting, and then everyone's left with a surprise. And so people tend to lose a lot of money in the design and development process to end up not being able to implement what they thought they could do. So while I share the concerns of the rest of the development industry that we don't want overregulation, we also think that it would behoove the city to try to streamline all of the recommendations and ordinances, have them in one central place so that we know the rules that we're supposed to be working within, and to make sure that they are indeed enforceable and can be reviewed at the front end of a design process as opposed to after something is already in construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Gower. I'm the Executive Director for the Associated General Contractors of East Tennessee, representing 250 construction companies on the commercial side of development. And our members who did the review on this realized that this affects the residential builders probably more so than the commercial side. But as they went through their review process, they found that most of what's being recommended is in the spirit of good building practices, and a lot of what is in there from the commercial building standpoint just makes good common sense. However, we realize that this is just the beginning of the process. And so thank you, Councilwoman Burrs, for talking about enforcement. That was at the top of our list, and over-regulation, and just making sure that we're not piling on. We know that we have some challenges on the city side, and we like our people that we work with at the city, but we realize that they're challenged when it comes to manpower and resources. So giving them additional regulations to have to enforce is something to consider. And also in terms of the permitting process and how this is going to extend that process, we're already running into some issues that where there's some ambiguity in that permitting process. And there were some issues that we ran across in the recommendations that we felt weren't appropriate when it comes to design standards and things like that. So at the end of the day, what we would like to see moving forward is for a consideration to bring a committee together of some architects, some commercial builders, some residential builders, some engineers, to review the recommendations that are in place now and make sure that they're practical in the field and implementable, while also making sure that they're protecting the land in our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Dane Bradshaw on behalf of Riverton LLC. Our group recently acquired 200 acres along the riverfront. They're the old Blue Cross Blue Shield parcel, 3,500 linear feet of river frontage. We're extremely excited about the plans. The overall economic impact is about $300 million once built out. Real estate agents are thrilled to death. They've got people that want to buy. Community members are asking us, when's it going to be ready? Builders all over us. This is going to be the largest mixed-use master plan community in the city of Chattanooga's history. It is a win-win-win. The neighbors of Lupton City across the way, we've had several meetings with them. They're extremely excited too because of their property value is going to increase, their ability to come shop at the new retail. You're talking live-work units, possibly a restaurant along the river. We're still in the planning phases. So when I hear the term, this report isn't viewed as, it's not anti-development. But had this report even in draft form been brought to the table prior to us buying this property, there's no way we would have ever bought it. Our partners would have never signed up. Nobody would have ever invested in it. So if a reputable development group that's always done things the right way, has a brilliant track record, would have never bought this property that the city of Chattanooga is dying to have, the demand is there, and we would have walked away because of this report, how is that not anti-development? How in the world is that not anti-development? Anybody, answer me, please. I think, you would think this is the wild, wild west, and I'm all for developers being held accountable because we got to live it. If one developer does the wrong thing, guess what? They're mad at us. The community's mad at us. They hold us accountable. It's like, oh, well, I'm mad at you because of what that guy did. Look, hold them accountable. That's what notice of violations are for, everything else. I get it. But let me tell you, I think everybody agrees how great the Ironman has been for the city of Chattanooga. We could all come in here right now and talk about all the things we don't like about the Ironman. I don't have to go this way when the traffic route. So let's put a big report together and put some new restrictions on the Ironman and force them to relocate to another city so we don't get it. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, that's exactly what we're doing to the builders. And I also heard the phrase, short-term risk for developers. Are you kidding me? You know how much we have at risk? What's a long-term risk is 50-plus employees that all of a sudden think they have the next project to go to, and we go back and tell them, sorry, can't do it. I don't know where we're going to go. Maybe you can move your family and go somewhere else. Move your kids to another school. Leave the city of Chattanooga, because everything you've worked hard for in your life, you got to go try another profession if you want to stay in Chattanooga. That's what's at risk here. And if that's not anti-development, I don't know what is. Thank you for your help and your open ears, and I hope we can do this together and build Chattanooga the right way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name's Brack Biggs. I live at 7311 Creek Ridge Drive. Count Miss Burtz as my councilman. Thank you for all the hard work. The reason I come forward today is not because I'm a large developer, but because I've lived up close and personal what good intentions can do. I sat as an associate with the Upper Duck River Development Agency back in the 90s. I was also living in Portland for a while, Portland, Oregon. And I saw, for Portland, Oregon is very much analogous at that time to what Chattanooga is going through right now. There were a lot of good intentions wrapped around a number of different environmental and economical decisions that were being made at the time. The problem is that it takes years, decades, to see how some of those effects are going to occur. And if we don't have a very close inspection of how we're doing what we're doing, we're going to suffer some of those effects. Some of the issues I see on the report is the consistency of the report within itself. Having been somebody that's sat and gone through more of these reports than I care to see. If you're going to measure a city, an economic area, to another economic area such as Williamson County, you've got to take several things into consideration that just don't seem to be appearing here. Topography, for instance. To compare our topography to Huntsville or to Williamson County is really, it doesn't work. You've got to really see how the developments are going there, what the effect has been. An additional issue is the economic impact. There has been no substantive economic impact study of what is going to happen with this program. If we put this in, we have no idea what's going to happen with the construction industry, but we have a pretty good inclination of what we think it'll happen. But we also don't really know what's going to happen environmentally. Everything that's within the report has good intentions. I have no doubt that staff put this together with a great deal of hard work and had the best of intentions. But good intentions, unfortunately, don't lead to automatically to good outcomes. As was stated in the report a number of times and was even mentioned tonight, and I quote, staff hopes that development will happen, but just in a different way. Well, in my industry, and as many industries I know of before, hope is a terrible plan. If we hope things will be better, we're in a world of hurt. The challenge is that when Portland made several of the decisions they made back in the early 90s, and I realize Portland, Oregon is centuries away from us, but in many ways it's really not. When they made their decisions several decades ago, they thought everything would just go fine. They didn't plan on the forced gentrification. They didn't plan on the unintended consequences of people not being able to control their land and going bankrupt. They weren't able to understand exactly what was going to happen to renters in the area and that they were going to be forced out, that minorities were going to be hit hardest. So I ask you and I thank you for the fact that you're slowing the process down and deliberating it in a more sensible way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, good evening. My name is Abby Roberts, and I live at 2611 Remington Street. That's in District 9, which is Representative Carrod's district. So I'm speaking as a landowner of a vacant tract of land that my husband and I purchased in 2012. It's about 10 acres in the steep and variable slope section. The property had been empty since the mid-2000s. The person that lived there had passed away, and we spent about 3 or 4 years re-upping a small house and beginning the long process of helping with some habitat restoration in the forest and the open area. It was land that had been cultivated and, yes, cherished for a very long time, not only by the previous landowner, but the neighbors in the area who have gathered pecans and walnuts, and the other neighbors whose children laughed and ran and played in that forest. Folks that maybe didn't have huge yards, but they did take the recreational opportunity of that space. There's a tree that probably stood at the close of the Civil War, at least we're told so by an arborist, and a great diversity of the forest environment, including mature trees, as someone mentioned before, wildlife, including deer, rabbits, birds of prey, and so I've heard a bear, but I haven't seen it. So why I'm standing up to speak is for a few reasons. One, I'm hoping to connect with other landowners, especially in East Chattanooga, who have similar interests in both habitat restoration and preserving the natural environment, removing invasive species, but with attention to not destabilize that land even further, to be conscious of the watershed that we live in, and the people that live there and their health and environment and the value of their properties as well. I do urge continuing support of the conversation about regulations with reasonable guidelines to prevent exploitive treatment of the land and the people who live in a neighborhood that sometimes is overlooked until other people who have resources see that there is money to be made there. I want to keep in mind the impact on East Chattanooga, and first considering and asking folks to please refrain from exploitive tactics from people who target properties that seem like they could have value. One of the things I've learned since being in that neighborhood and in other neighborhoods in Chattanooga, I never got postcards in the mail of people asking to buy my land for cash, or to unload my house quick, or do I need some quick cash in my pocket. My husband and I are fortunate that that is not our situation, and we have the luxury to think about other things, like the long-term preservation of this land. But I ask that folks think of neighbors who do not, folks that are elderly, on disability, and who have lived and loved their neighborhood for many years. So in sum, I'm supportive of regulations with consideration, especially for folks that live in the neighborhoods. And I do request that anyone that has similar interests, especially if there's someone in the city, I don't know of any particular contacts or constituencies to have the conversation about land preservation in East Chattanooga, especially the northern slopes of Missionary Ridge. And I'd like to continue that conversation with folks that are interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the council, I'm Sandy Kurtz, and I live at 1803 Coward Street. That's Councilman Oglesby district, and I am a homeowner. I am also an environmental educator, as most of you know, and working with several environmental organizations. But today, the most important one is South Chickamauga Creek Greenway Alliance, the citizen advocacy group that speaks for the creek, as we say. In the early 1990s, I worked with the Greenways Commission and the National Parks, Resources, and Conservation Services to determine where to put greenways. And the first question was, what makes Chattanooga, Chattanooga? And the answer was steep slopes and stream corridors. Stream corridors means floodplains, basically, and the water itself, of course. So today, at last, after years of citizen advocacy, Chattanooga and Hamilton County Regional Planning Agency has finally produced this natural resources assessment report. It is good and thorough. Congratulations, thanks to all those involved, and thanks for allowing citizen input. A few observations about the assessment that I hope will provide guidance as ordinances are put in place, One, I don't believe the floodplain improvements suggested are strong enough. It was shocking to learn that 80% of our floodplains are already gone. In a flood-prone city, with likely more catastrophic storms in our future, it makes no sense to take up all the space that can hold floodwaters. I would urge, actually, a moratorium on any more building and filling and rezoning of floodplains. This report tells us that since 2000, there have been 34 flood events in Hamilton County, producing an annual average of $1.3 million of property damage. Number two, shocking to learn also that we only had 2 of the zoning categories protecting natural resources compared to 22 from other comparable cities. Our stream corridors need strong protection to assure free services that nature provides, free services, erosion prevention, water and air cleaning, ecosystem balance through biodiversity, and slowing of climate change impacts. In Asheville, North Carolina, which was one of the compared cities, one sees land set aside solely to protect watersheds for drinking water quality and availability. It's the same in New York City. Maybe we could do something similar. Home builders hope to dilute the regulations that are likely to be put into the new ordinances. Perhaps one thing they'll appreciate at least is clarity, not loopholes and waivers, so that there is an even playing field. They are concerned about rising costs, of course, and as we all are. Oops.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I'll submit the rest of my comments to the council.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Mike Price, MAP Engineers. With the council's indulgence,
I know there's been a lot of discussion about steep slopes. I thought a visual representation might be helpful for y'all as maybe everyone else in the audience. Doug, if you don't mind, I'm going to like to use your foot for a second. Now, there's been discussion about what 15%, this is what constitutes a steep slope. So I want you to see what 15% looks like. There's a steep slope at 15%. I'd love to have that in most yards, and most people probably would too. Let's look at what 25% is. There's 25%.
What's your distance there?
That's 20 feet.
20 feet and how wide?
No, we can't get into that back and forth, so finish your presentation. That's just his presentations, you know, just let him have his presentation, please. Ma'am, please, we gotta do this in an orderly manner.
This is 25%, right? This is 25%. Now let's talk about 35%. Now this is what the state of Tennessee determines is a steep slope. That right there, that's a steep slope by the state of Tennessee, TGAP. Right there. So while all this discussion goes on, understand the definition of what a steep slope is. Don't take just what you hear in a report. Go out and see what that really looks like. And maybe when y'all do maybe some of those site visits, that's what you'll come to recognize. The other thing that I would point out is this. In years past, the city of Chattanooga, whenever there has been like a zoning overlay or when we do variances, we notify the property owners. So at the end of the day, whatever is determined, if there is new regulations that are going to impact all of the property owners, they need to be notified before anything is passed, that they have the ability to understand exactly what these regulations are. We have many property owners that live or have property that live outside the area, or maybe they don't understand, they're not here tonight, maybe they're not engaged in the process. But they need to be notified. That's America. So whatever is decided, that would be the two things I would ask you to do. Make sure you understand what it is we're talking about. And secondly, we notify the property owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Drew Bailey. I'm 3730W Road. I live on a steep slope. I also teach at UTC in the Department of Health and Human Performance. I also teach outdoor recreation and tourism. So I'm here to speak because I believe there's a false dichotomy being set up here and an assumption that green spaces can't make money, that they have zero economic impact, or they actually prevent economic impact. The construction industry in the United States supports about 6.4 million jobs every year. Every one of those is important. I used to work construction. My body hurt, so I got out of it. I respect what you guys do. Outdoor recreation and the travel that is involved with that supports 7.6 million jobs in the United States every year. So there's actually 1 million more jobs in the United States supported for outdoor recreation and tourism. And you can assume what that would be in Hamilton County. $1 billion, over $1 billion is brought here in tourism every year. In this 3rd congressional district, 38 outdoor companies call this district home. And local adventures, the reasons that people come here to have adventures, they occur on steep slopes. We have rock climbers that come here and spend $10 million every year in Chattanooga, Hamilton County. And that's a non-consumable. They come here every year and spend it again, and spend it again. Once it's not something that's built and cannot be, no money can be made off of it again. Ironman, there's been a lot of talk about Ironman, brings in $13 million every year. One year we had 4 of those. It's a non-consumable. It relies on natural green spaces and trails. An example of how development can infringe on economic impact of those activities. In 2017, the swim portion of the Ironman was canceled because of heavy flooding, and 20 times the safe amount of E. coli was in the Tennessee River. You couldn't swim in it. They had to cancel it, and people have decided not to come back to the Chattanooga Ironman because of that. In 2016, 2018, we had the highest do not finish rates in the Ironman history in Chattanooga because this September, we were 6 degrees hotter than the 20-year average in September in Chattanooga. A lot of that can be attributed to the decline in tree canopy and the increase in impervious surfaces, dark asphalt that holds the heat. So we are currently losing economic impact because of these situations. So it's not a win-win on both sides. It can be, though, and I believe the developers have a good heart, and I believe these guys enjoy outdoor activities as well. And it's hard for me to imagine that places like Nashville and Birmingham and Knoxville can come up with a way to encourage development without harming their natural resources. And the #1 outdoor town in America cannot figure out how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Ethan Collier, and as you know, I have the great honor of serving as chairman of the Planning Commission. I have some thoughts I'd like to share with you from that perspective. What I've seen over the last 6 years is a growing and intensifying pressure created by development in many areas of our city. These pressures and development activities have resulted in a great deal of discomfort for those who live in the communities. They have watched as heavy construction equipment cuts down trees and into the hills to make room for more homes. They've had to deal with the noise and traffic that comes with this type of construction. People have suffered, and as their neighborhoods went from quiet little streets to what felt like war zones, they became more and more angry. Frankly, who could blame them? Their communities are changing, and they don't like it one bit. Today, they fill our Planning Commission meetings in opposition to new developments. I'm sympathetic to what they have endured. They are fed up. Now, these neighborhoods haven't always been so desirable. Neighborhoods go through phases of growth. St. Elmo and North Chattanooga have had some serious growing pains over the last several years. Just 20 years ago, homes on the North Shore were falling down and could be bought for $10,000. One could drive down St. Elmo Avenue and see boarded up homes with roofs caving in. But these two communities, they survived those hard days. Young families found homes that they could buy for cheap. And with hundreds of hours of sweat equity, they made for themselves homes that are beautiful and desirable. On the North Shore, our city developed one of Chattanooga's finest parks, Coolidge Park. Businesses started investing on Fraser Avenue, and then came the real catalyst. A group of people decided to make a huge investment into the Normal Park School. These people, they invested thousands of dollars and even more hours into a school that is today one of the most sought-after schools in our county. All of this hard work created an incredible place to live, a beautiful community, and others wanted to join them. What the development community has done is respond to that demand. These are some of the most wonderful neighborhoods that our city has to offer. These two communities, St. Elmo and North Chattanooga, are over 100 years old, and they are built on some of Chattanooga's steepest slopes and most difficult to develop landscape. The vast majority of what we see today in these two communities was developed a long, long time ago. I promise when those homes were built, the virgin trees were cut down. When the roads were cut in, the landscape was changed forever. Just drive down Tennessee Avenue, and you'll see the walls that were built over 100 years ago to deal with these slopes. On any weekday morning at 6 a.m., you can find a group of CrossFit junkies doing the hill climbs while running up Kent Avenue. And to their right and left, you'll find homes. These aren't new homes. They've been there the last 100 years. For Chattanooga, steep slopes is business as usual. It's not a new problem. Steep slopes are where we have built some of our finest neighborhoods and homes for the last 100 years. Steep slopes feels new. It feels like a problem, but just look around and you will see that steep slope development is in our Chattanooga DNA.
Hi, Lynn Bartoletti, 1805 West 56th Street. I moved here 15 years ago because I was attracted to the greenery of this city, the awesome rock cliffs and the great rivers surrounding this area. I purchased 5 acres in St. Elmo. I've added a couple acres to that. Quite a bit of that is on steep slope. or contains steep slopes, and I am all for every regulation and put into an ordinance to protect these areas. As Ethan stated, it has been a nightmare. It's been probably 2.5, 3 years of constant construction noise in the area. It's extremely upsetting when you see an area clear cut of old trees. I believe we need to actually add some tree protection to these ordinances. This is the scenic city. It has been voted twice as the leading outdoor city. I think people have presented the figures to support that fact. I don't think you can disregard the dollars that the tourism brings into this area. I would be willing to stand there and dispute the fact that if the destruction of our green spaces continues, we will lose those tourism dollars. I have been coming to this city since the early 80s, at which time I would not have moved here. I've seen great improvements made on this city. I would like to continue to see responsible building. I would like to see a commission that is balanced with some environmentalists, not just real estate agents and developers. Because our frustration is great when we go to protest a drastic change in the neighborhood, and it's backed up by the Planning Commission that makes a suggestion to help us, and then it gets shot down by the Planning Commission. We need the regulations placed in an ordinance. We need to rein in the development and keep it in a responsible manner. That's all we're asking, and this be done in a responsible manner. I live at the foot of Lookout. I don't want to see Lookout washed down on top of me. Thank you. Please consider putting this ordinance in play as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you, Council. My name is Jeff Meldal. I live in District 7 at 109 Ox Highway. I stood up when we had a roll call of the building trades members here. I've been in the building trades in Chattanooga since I moved here. But I support this study and the proposed changes to the city law because I think this is not something you can get back. Like temp growth is something that we've been enjoying for the last several years, staying busy, but there comes a point when growth ends and then you're left with the consequences of all that growth and no more growth coming. I think the sustainable forms of growth that several previous speakers mentioned are the model that we should be going to. Well, as an earlier speaker said, like there's plenty more development to be had in Chattanooga. And to my brothers and sisters in the building trades, I'd say let's focus on getting benefits agreements in the city that say, hey, if you're a building company from Texas, you can't come to Chattanooga and use your own guys and subcontract here. It's got to be Chattanooga builders building our stuff in Chattanooga. That's another avenue that we can ensure that people who are living and making their wages here are getting paid and doing the development that we want to see in a responsible way. I don't think anybody would mistake Chattanooga for a city that's overburdened by regulation. I was just in Nashville recently. I was attending a funeral and I happened to cross paths with a developer who lived there, and he was saying that his company had gotten into a project in Chattanooga. And what he said to me was, we ruined Nashville and now we're coming to ruin Chattanooga. And he regretted it. He said, we have done a bad thing here because we took advantage of a totally unregulated situation and we built the hell out of this city, and now it's basically unlivable. People have been pushed out and the people that live there are living at reduced standards because of the consequences of development. As with so many things in the city of Chattanooga, like, we have a chance to get out ahead of this. We can see the mistakes that bigger cities have made. We can see the successes that other cities have had. If you ever fly into Charlotte, you see their canopy is incredible. You can tell it just flying into the airport. And we can take a page out of their books and avoid some of the mistakes of cities that have gone the wrong way on these things. So I urge the council to take up the recommendations of the planning, whatever the body is that planned it, and continue to look at, how we can hybridize the needs of the development community and the workers who do these jobs, who put up these houses, with the interest of the city as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am taking it from the fact that there's nobody else in line, that everybody that wanted to speak has been able to speak their mind. And I want to say personally, I appreciate all of you coming out and letting us hear from you. And I think this is what makes Chattanooga a great place to live. And even though many of us here are on different sides of this issue, I think we can work together. And government works best when its citizens are involved. And Mr. Fisher, I do believe that we can resolve this through civil discourse. Our work is just beginning, and this is going to be a long process. In fact, I spent the first part of this day at the Land Development Office trying to understand what enforcement tools they have and what enforcement tools they need to better enforce the rules that we have. And there were some glaring discrepancies and some voids in what they're able to enforce and being able to have some teeth to it. So, Mr. Chairman, I fully expect by next Tuesday to be able to make some recommendations to be able to give Land Development Office some better better tools to be able to address some of the violations that many of let me back that up, not many, a handful of developers, I will say that, a handful of developers seem to continue to violate our stormwater codes that make it very difficult on all of the very good builders that we do have out there. And so we're going to have to be able to distinguish between the groups. And I think that we can come to a resolution that we all can get on board with. And I look forward to working with everybody here in this room to be able to come to that resolution.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Henderson. I believe that speaks for all of us, actually. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Seeing that there's no one, I appreciate your comments, Councilman Henderson and Councilwoman Burrs. This is a great city, and there's friends in this room on both sides. I think we all agree that there is something that we can do together. And I'm seeing folks who are on opposite sides. I'm seeing them sit next to each other. So I know that that spirit of cooperation is going to happen. I just feel it. I know it's going to happen. So I want to remind everybody that next Tuesday, November 12th, at our 3 o'clock session, the Regional Planning Agency will give us a kind of a report on the feedback from the public input as to their interpretations of what you all have said to us tonight. There will be a 1:30 education session, which we're calling part 2 of the assessment. We got through, we started it last week, and actually it was fascinating. So we're learning more and more about some of these strategies that are being proposed, but also we are also taking our time in making sure that we do this right. And I think that we've hit on some key points, from the spirit of cooperation to enforcement, something we've been talking about. And I look forward to the engagement with all of you. Thank all of you for coming tonight. This is amazing that we have this kind of participation in our local government, as Councilman Henderson said. And I feel that this was a very productive time well spent this evening. And I thank every one of you for coming. Mr. Chairman, I think maybe before we continue with our business, might we give a 5-minute recess to...
Well, we have other council person would like to speak. So Councilwoman Burrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug, Jim, you both did a beautiful job. Thank you, all of you. I listened intently to what you were saying, and what I didn't hear, and I hope we don't hear again in this chamber, is two sides. I didn't hear two sides. What I heard was people who really care about where they live and want to figure out the best way to make it the most livable place around. Ethan, what you said was terrific. I really appreciate that. What you said about people not being comfortable, and yet people have not been comfortable for years. I've ridden around those areas, and those stone walls are beautiful. Chattanooga has dealt with these challenges for a very long time. I didn't hear one person here that wasn't very sincere in what she or he was saying. And I think I like the suggestions, as I said earlier, of not siloing ourselves, but sitting down and collaboratively solving the problems. You took a lot of time and energy to be here today, and for that I'm extremely grateful. My colleagues share in this. We've talked a lot about how we want right things to happen. Chip, thank you very much for bringing up the enforcement issue. It's something that I've been concerned about for a very long time. We need to be very clear about what we're going to enforce and not just throw out regulations out there because it sounds good. The other thing that I heard mentioned by someone was unintended consequences. I think we have to look at those very clearly. So in my mind, we're not ready for an ordinance. We're ready to very thoughtfully look at these issues from a number of angles and not be small and take sides. This isn't a take sides issue. We all love Chattanooga. We want the right things for Chattanooga, and we're bright enough to know how to get there. So thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Burrs. Well, if there's no other business, we said we was going to do 45 minutes, and we actually did an hour and 10 minutes. So we were serious about making sure that every voice is heard in a manner that they were comfortable communicating that in. So with that being said, this hearing is now adjourned, and council, we will take a 5-minute break, and then we will resume our business. Thank you all for coming.
I see, Jeff.
I know you probably drained and you know, whacked out right now. Thank you. Hey, man, good to see you. It was good to see you out there. Hey, brother, what's going on? Yeah, thank you.
Sir, well, good to see you. Yes, sir. Phil Noblet. Yes, sir. Very good to see you, Marcus. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Good, man. Thanks for coming back. Yeah. It won't be long.
Short agenda tonight. Fairly short agenda tonight. Yes. All right.
What we got here? Huh? Yeah, give it to Nicole. Yeah. I thought that went well.
I did.
Very well.
You can't tell me folks can't speak for 3 minutes.
No, everybody has
Yeah.
plenty of time on there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work just to try to get more time fully on either. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
That was plenty of time.
Yeah. Excuse me, Executive Director of the Democratic
Number one thing.
Devon? Oh, hi. Okay, very good. Yes, very good. Well, thank you. I hope I can do a good job for you. All right. Well, very good to see you.
Was the fact that we passed the ordinance and they
Just ignored it.
ignored whatever they wanted. Well, yeah, a lot of, we need some teeth to be able to prevent them from pulling permits, get CO. Well, they finally got it to where they can't get CO. They're doing that. We need to get it where they can't pull permits, get their teeth.
So did they go in and try to tear up the 15-foot buffer on there? I remember that was started
did.
out. Yeah.
Of course, part of it they
They
said.
came in over the weekend too.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's part of the problem too.
Yeah, it's one of those deals that knock it down and we'll play it back. Yeah, because they didn't want that, they didn't want the buffer that was there, they wanted
Yeah, but how important is it to deal with that issue, especially if bulldozing it down there, it's going to stop working. And they did put a stop work order, I remember, in that case.
I don't know, and I'm talking to them about a nuclear option, about the venom. I don't know, we'll see, they're gonna give me some recommendations, some framework. So the framework, I'm gonna get up here and
The argument is always going to be, are we taking their property whenever we're doing stuff like that? But if they have violated our ordinance, we can clearly restrict what they're doing on the land.
Yeah, right. I mean, in the rezoning, if there's conditions, they're agreeing to them, and that, and they all.
The stormwater regs clearly got that $5,000 civil penalty aspect of it.
Yeah.
The building ordinances do not. It's frustrating. You get them for a $50 fine, that's about all you get per day.
Yeah.
And if they've got a big development going on, they're going to pay that $50 fine. If the judge will ever impose it.
That's what they told me about it. Credit card down on the counter and say, just put it on the card. Put it on the card, and we'll just keep paying it, and we'll just keep paying. I mean, look, when you're making $1 million, $5,000 is nothing.
Right.
Oh. And now one of the things that they were talking about is, mechanism to be able to double the fines. But I think the biggest key thing is to take their money away and pull a permit. That gets their attention. You can't pull a permit, you're out business.
And if we can take their permit for a period of time based upon what they've done in this case and not let them do the other jobs.
Yeah.
That would be too.
Yeah, right. Now, that's where we're talking about. Just maybe you have to go to a class, maybe sit down.
Yeah. Well, we can do it for
What's going on, brother?
vacation rentals.
Yeah.
It's a permit. It's a permit.
Emma Wheeler Homes or Coxville Court? Okay. Why are we putting Okay, I will. Okay, thanks for the heads up. Okay, thanks for the heads up.
Yes, sir, Steve. Yes, sir. Hey, Carl. Doing all right today, sir?
If you want to see a really good example of no planning and development,
I wondered about Cudjoe Key these days.
all the Florida keys.
All the keys.
Look at South Florida.
Yes.
The water pollution problems they're having, all the red tide issues that they're having,
Yes.
the lack of fresh water going into Florida Bay, which is essential for the wildlife and the marine environment, all kinds of stuff. You know, and the keys have got this thing called radar. They got built a lot, build them out of a single year.
Good evening once again.
That's crazy.
Good evening once again. I will now re-adjourn our city council meeting for November 25th. We will now move into our order of business. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. There are no ordinances on final reading, and coincidentally, there's no ordinances on first reading. So now we will move on to resolutions. Madam Clerk, please read 7A.
A resolution to amend resolution number 29816 to include NCR Corporation, formerly JetPay, as the authorized vendor of merchant services under the Inco Sewer Billing Services contract eligible for payment by the city for services rendered.
Councilwoman Byrd, followed by Councilman Ledford.
Move approval?
Moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Information Officer to enter into a blanket agreement with Target Solutions Learning LLC for the purchase of training tools and administrative software to be utilized by the Chattanooga Fire Department beginning November 1, 2019 through October 31, 2022, to be paid in full at the beginning of the contract period with a total contract value not to exceed $150,000.
Council, what is your pleasure? It's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. 7C, please.
A resolution to amend resolution number 29863 adopted on April 2, 2019, adopting new rules of operation for the Chattanooga City Council.
Councilwoman Byrd.
Sir, I move approval, and then I would like to amend.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded.
Yes, sir. I would like to amend on item 7, public comment. At the end of each council business meeting, the chairperson will recognize members of the public who wish to address the council. The following procedural rules will apply.
Okay, that's what you amended?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I feel strongly that people ought to be able to speak between first and second reading of issues, since it's usually the only time, because of the time, it's 6 o'clock at night. They don't have the opportunity to come other times, and I feel strongly that they ought to be able to speak, at least be heard.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded by Vice Chairman Henderson.
I would like a roll call vote, please.
You was reading my mind.
Okay.
Let us do a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Burrs.
Yes.
Coonrod. Yes. Gilbert. Yes. Henderson.
Yes.
Ledford. Smith.
Yes.
Oglesby?
Yes.
That's all yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I move that the resolution be passed as amended.
Okay. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions on that matter? All in favor by the sign of aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Okay, let's move on to 7D, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into an interlocal agreement with WWTA entitled the Environment and Economic Infrastructure Improvements E2I2 for mutual beneficial cooperation to reduce the scope and cost of the projects.
Councilman Gilbert.
Chair, before we vote on this, can Dennis Malone come up and explain what we are talking about?
Good evening. As you asked earlier, the E2I2 is an agreement with the City of Chattanooga and WWTA as presented last week in our committee meeting by Jeff Rose that talked about its collaboration with both WWTA and EPA to create equalization stations at close proximities to connections with WWTA connections to the City of Chattanooga. 3 main locations are being studied in this, and that is for equalization stations at East Ridge, Lee Highway, and Signal Mountain area. The approach will help both the city and WWTA meet compliance with their CDs. Excuse me. The plan would allow shared costs for construction and future maintenance. It is the study consolidation of the 2 systems. But this is not for the study of the consolidation of both systems.
On that, I'll move to approve.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, before we move on to the next one, I want to go back to item Resolution 7C, Resolution number 29863. If there's no objections, I'd like to propose that the revision goes into effect on December the 3rd. Any objection, Council? Okay. So that particular resolution will take effect on December 3rd. Thank you, Council. Now, let's move on to 7E, please.
A resolution authorizing approval of change order number 1 final for Kimley Horn and Associates relative to contract number T17008-101 for professional services associated with transit signal prioritization and accessibility for an increased amount of $670,570 for a revised contract amount not to exceed $1,420,000.
We have, well, let's go back. Councilman Gilbert, followed by Councilwoman Burrs.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Council. That concludes that part of this agenda. Now we will move on to purchases.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
We have 2 purchase items for your review and consideration, both being from the Department of Public Works, first being from Fleet Management Division, a new blanket contract for fueling station repair service and upgrades being awarded to First Choice Services Incorporated for a total estimated annual amount of $75,000. And last, from the Waste Resource Division, a blanket contract renewal for Joy Air Compressor Services being awarded to Fluid Flow Products Incorporated for a total estimated annual amount of $525,000.
Council, what is your pleasure? Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? All in favor by the sign of aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now we'll move on to other business. Is there any other business this council would like to share with us this evening? Councilman Gilbert.
Yes, Chair. This past Saturday, some organizations got together for as Parrish Valley and Vineyard Church, Twin Division, and Live and Not Die Church provided clothing for the homeless. Even the lady that's actually worked there said that she never seen that much donated at one time, so they did a great job. And we also fed them a good meal, and they did appreciate it very much. I think we need to do more of that because they did appreciate it, and it was a good opportunity for us to come together as a whole to make a difference. So
great. Thank you, Councilman Gilbert, for the great work that you're doing in your district. Is there any other council person who would like to share anything? Okay, if not, we'll move on to committee reports. Councilwoman Burrs. Thank you. Councilwoman Coonrod. Hit your button. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Youth and Family Development Committee meeting next Tuesday.
We always look forward to those.
That's right, the best department in the city.
I won't argue that. Councilman Gilbert. Okay. Vice Chairman Henderson.
I'm gonna wait for just a minute.
Yeah, for it to catch up.
I think it takes a while to travel back there and then back up here, I guess.
Mhm.
Our ad hoc committee that has been meeting to look over the amendments to the short-term vacation rental met again today to finalize our recommendations, and we have been promised that we'll have a draft ordinance by the weekend, by Friday. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request that we discuss this in strategic planning on the following Tuesday. Next
Okay,
week.
that'll be great. So, Madam Clerk, let's make sure that's on our strategic planning agenda. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Councilman Ledford.
There we go. All right, fantastic. Maybe we need a resolution that says no one's allowed to touch these settings from now on. Thank you, Chairman. Planning and Zoning did meet today where we covered 4 ordinance items, 1 resolution, and had a great presentation on the new airport district plan. Thank you.
Yes, we did. Councilman Smith.
Today we had a public safety committee meeting. We did discuss an ordinance that has been provided to this council to put the police advisory committee formation and requirement of such on referendum for the next election. We discussed it going on in November of 2020, which will allow the people to vote as to whether or not to codify the existence of the police advisory committee within the city government.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. That concludes our committee reports. Now we'll move on to recognition of persons wishing to address the City Council on non-agenda items. Mr. City Attorney, would you please read the rules of engagement?
Yes, sir. Your current city council rules of operation were adopted back in April of 2019. You were just this evening discussing new rules that will go into effect on December the 3rd. At the end of each council meeting, the chair can recognize members of the public that wish to address the council, and here's the rules. Anybody wishing to address the council can only speak at the microphone provided up front for that purpose. They can't have more than 3 minutes to speak. The speaker can address the council only upon matters within the legislative and quasi-judicial authority of the council. The speaker cannot be permitted to use any vulgar, obscene language nor use the floor to personally attack or personally denigrate others. And the chair cannot recognize any person, neighborhood, association, or organization to speak to the council during the non-agenda portion more than twice in any 30-day time period. At this point in time, the only person that's on the list for more than, I guess, 2 times is Ms. Mott. So, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Is there anyone wish to address the council at this time on non-agenda items? If not, we are adjourned.
Can you send me a copy of that little sheet of paper that you had about where you want the minutes to go? I want to make sure I include that before Friday. Oh. You still have it? I know I've got it somewhere. I'll find it. The reason I remember it was on a print sheet or. Yeah. It was. If I can just make a copy of it, that's it. Can I make a copy of the back? I'll bring it right back.